but also find a community that can be truthful with you and be open to hearing things that you might not see, but it's important for you to be able to see.
And at the end of the day, I think what's most important is for the person to realize that a lot of this is out of your control. You're not going to be able to control a significant amount of how this ends up playing out. And I think at the end of the day, you hold on to the principles of doing what's right and doing what's fair. And I think empathy. But very importantly, don't lose yourself. Welcome to the Solar-Wilson Conversation. This is a forum where we share our views through the lens of a Nigerian, lesbian, legally married couple. I am Margaret Solar-Wilson.
And I am Moji Solar-Wilson.
Moji and I believe in and are committed to creating space for real, authentic, transparent, and inclusive conversation. We talk with each other and we talk with others. So sit back because it's time for real talk. Well, Moji, it's good to be back. We've been away for a while, and so we haven't put out our podcasts for a couple of months, but we're back, and it's great to be back. How are you?
Absolutely fantastic. It was good to be away, really. Life was lifing, and, sometimes you need a break.
Yes, absolutely. So today's topic came out of a conversation, as usual, that we both had, and I know you wanted us to spend some time talking about parenting in the LGBTQ community. So I must say I'm looking forward to the conversation. But first, why did you want us to talk about this?
Well, I get a lot of letters and emails and back channels on social media from women that have children, and sometimes men that have children, that have been in heteronormative settings before, and they're now coming out of the closet. And of course, there's a lot of challenges when you're living a past life and you're bringing the children with you into the new life. A lot of us have challenges, and it can be very confusing. And it can be very traumatizing sometimes because of society's ground rules on what a family looks like. Funny enough, what triggered this was I heard a podcaster talking about what the family unit should be, and that LGBTQIAs are not part of the nuclear family, which we're not, We're not the heteronormative setup. So the rules, the guidelines, everything changes, and we have to create our own.
So when you say the LGBTQIA, forgive me if I'm misquoting you, but sounds like the podcast you listened to, the presenter was saying the nuclear family construct does not apply to LGBTQIA people. And I presume that's because when many people think of a nuclear family, they think of a biological mother, a biological father, and biological children. But the reality is that even in the heterosexual community, people get separated, they remarry, or they align with another long-term partner. And so you very often have that mix of children who are biological and non-biological, step-parents, step-children. So I guess, why would you narrow that down to the LGBTQIA community as opposed to thinking of this as a challenge for everyone, regardless of sexuality.
Truth of the matter is that it is a challenge for everyone, regardless of sexuality. But when you add the sexuality on top of it, it makes it absolutely a lot more challenging. And a great example is when parent or mother has been with a man and they have biological children, or even non-biological children, even if they adopt. The children are used to a different dynamic and the stereotypical household, usually. When a man gets together with another man, they have that privilege of the masculine respect that comes along with being in a relationship with a man. So when two men get together, I don't think it's as hard as when two women get together. When a woman meets another woman and they decide to build a life together, society already discounts women, right? So when two women now come together, in my opinion, it becomes a double jeopardy of some sort, right? The respect factor that if a heterosexual woman leaves her heterosexual relationship and meets another man, the man is treated differently with a lot more respect than when a woman comes in with another woman, because there's misogyny and a lot of other things that comes into play there. So the partner does not get the kind of respect they would get if they were a man. It's just that it is the way it is.
It sounds like there might be an element of homophobia playing into this, misogyny, patriarchy.
Yeah.
Is that how you think about this?
That's how I see it, not think about it. It's something I have lived. It's something I have lived with you. And one of the reasons why it's important for me, to talk about this is because I'm not the only one that has gone through this. And I have yet to hear a lot of lesbians especially talk about this from their lenses, because we come to the table, each and every one of us, we have different intersectionalities, but there's a commonality in the fact that lesbians are all women. Well, most lesbians are cis women, right? And patriarchy comes into it, where the boy child is now, quote unquote, the man of the house. I don't understand how that even happened or happens. But when I look back at our walk, Margaret, I see a lot of patriarchy, I see a lot of misogyny, I see a lot of homophobia. And homophobia kind of stems from religious backgrounds, mainly. Patriarchy is all across the board. But yeah, I think it's something that's important that we talk about. At least I talk about.
It's interesting, when you just said when you think about our walk, and it got me thinking that even as we talk about this as a single issue, there are other nuances. So for example, when we met, I labeled myself consciously child-free because I've never wanted to have children, right? Which is different from someone who is childless, who wants to have children, but for some reason is unable to do that. And as I think about your comments, I think one of the misconceptions is that because I am consciously child-free, I have no clue about parenting. And so I think maybe that's another thing I would ask you. What is parenting?
If you asked me 30 years ago, I would say it's raising your own children, because that's what people think about when they think about parenting. But from spending the past few years with you and looking around me rather, what I see is a lot of people that give birth to little people, but they don't parent. They want to be their best friends. A parent to me is like a coach. Your coach teaches you how to become the best version of yourself by pushing you to exert and go past what you believe you can do. Parents have this. When I was growing up, my father had taught me how to do a lot of different things. He made me get up very early in the morning, 5 a.m. every day, to go to his job sites and things like that. He owned a fishing trailer. We would go on the ships, and I would be with him while he was doing things. We no longer do that. A parent is a coach. A parent is not your best friend till you get older. A parent is somebody that guides you and gives you the life lessons and the tools that you need to survive, because the world is not as easy as we tell our children in 2023, or even in the 90s. When I was growing up, we had guidelines, we had rules, we had regulations. I didn't negotiate. I was rewarded for doing good things that were good. But I didn't have a saying, I'm not going to school. I didn't have a saying, I couldn't call people by their first names. It's a sign of respect for myself as well as the elder, right? In modern age, I see a lot of parents not parenting. I see that. I call this thing stupiditis. I coined it because no matter how bad or how horrible my children behaved at one point in my life, because I was working from a place of guilt, I didn't see them as people, like humans. I saw them as babies. I saw them as little children that I had to protect. And the overprotecting of the children is actually a lot more harmful. But there's this innate need to protect, overprotect our little people that we now, what I find is that we infantilize them. We don't allow them to exercise their emotional intelligence muscles. We don't allow them to fail so they understand failure is not the end of things. You can come back as long as you take the life lessons from it. So I see parenting. What is a parent? A parent is a person that's able to guide you, to give you the tools that you need to go on in life. And you don't have to be a biological parent. Anybody can parent you. As a matter of fact, when I look around my life, I actually have friends that parent to me. We don't use the word parenting, but when I need certain things, I go to that person. They call them coaches now. So maybe the analogy of a parent should change from a person that gives birth biologically to another human being, to a person that's coaching them. In my eyes, that's what a parent should be.
It's interesting listening to the evolution of how you think about parenting, because in my case, I think it's the reverse. Mm-hmm. The first baby I ever carried was my brother's first daughter. And I was 16 and I carried her and, changed her nappies and did those sort of things. And as she grew older and as my brother had more children, I was fully invested in supporting their personal growth, their professional growth, their emotional growth. And as I got older, I was surrounded by lots of, how we are in Nigeria, cousins and maybe even children of people who are just simply related to you very distantly, sometimes children of friends. But I found myself surrounded by children. And I also continued to feel invested in nurturing their growth. But I didn't feel the need to have my own biological children. And interestingly enough, I didn't differentiate between all the children around me. The goal was to help them develop. But as I've grown older, and particularly after we got married, it's interesting. I have begun to see that my view of parenting does not seem to be aligned with the general view of parenting, which is, only biological parents know how to parent because they birthed those children. And it's interesting. I find, however, that model in a way limits a 360 approach to the development of the child. Because I truly believe that it takes a village to raise a child. not only in good times, but also in bad times and also in ugly times.
I have to say I agree with you to a certain extent. I don't believe you need to be a biological parent to be able to parent a human, right? When you look at the animal community, four-legged people, a dog has a child, or 7 or 10, and maybe the owner only keeps one. And the puppies are given out to other people in the hopes that they will nurture, love, and take care of them. In the olden days in Nigeria, it didn't make sense to me until a few years ago. When parents have children, they send them to their uncles, to their aunts, every summer to experience other people and how other people live. And most of us went to boarding schools. It didn't hit me until I ran into the snag with my youngest son. Boarding school is part of what helped me to grow as a human being. And I started boarding school very early, I think 7 or 8, if I remember. What I have now learned, in my opinion, a lot of parents, biological parents, are not able to see their children as they are. We have these fantasies in our head of what they are. We have created this illusion of grandeur, where a child is being disrespectful and being, mean and rude to us. And we think, we make excuses. It's because I went through a divorce. It's because I came out of the closet. In my case, it's because. When what the child is showing is behavioral issues that needs to be corrected, that we, for some reason, can't see. The things we think are cute at home is not cute. When your child is just respectful at home, usually they will step out eventually and do the same thing to somebody else. So what I have realized is that parenting, you don't have to be a biological parent. You need more than one person, more than your view to see clearly. And the more I have been through what I call the ringer, right? I've been in a boxing match for the past few years. I'm able to look at people and tell and literally dissect and diagnose where they're going to end up. Because I've seen it too many times. A biological mother, especially, because fathers don't seem to have this issue. I don't know if you've noticed that. Fathers are able to discipline their children. Fathers are able to correct their children a lot better than biological mothers. Somebody needs to do a study, as a matter of fact, about what happens when that umbilical cord is connected. Because there's this thing, I often use Jeffrey Dahmer's mother. Jeffrey Dahmer ate a lot of people, right? But the love of the mother is always going to be there. It's always there, usually. And most mothers sacrifice themselves for their children. They sacrifice their emotional state. They sacrifice their mental, financial burdens are carried by mothers, not usually fathers. There's a dynamic that needs to be studied there. What happens to a woman when she carries that alien in her body? That's why I called it stupiditis, where your child is being rude and disrespectful and you think it's cute, or you're making excuses for them not doing the things that they need to learn to do when they go out in society before you unleash them into the world. A lot of things just doesn't make sense. And the more we talk about this nuclear family, the more afraid I am of where the future is going.
Yeah, your comments are really insightful. And just to be clear, I didn't say I believe that only biological parents can parent. What I did say was that as I've grown older, I have observed that many biological parents believe that they are the only ones capable of parenting their child. And that's what I think is impacting the larger community from supporting them. It's impacting even input from teachers in schools. Yeah. Because what I see often is the biological parent believing in only their own evaluation and believing firmly that, their solution is correct. But bringing this back to the LGBT community, Because I honestly think, as I recall your earlier comments about the difference between two gay men who may have children in the family and two lesbian women who have children in the family, I do believe there's an element of homophobia and patriarchy that runs into this. Are children homophobic, and how does that play out in the family?
Of course, children are homophobic. Children are
Can some children be homophobic?
Yeah, of course. Some children can be homophobic. Keyword is some. And they can be homophobic because of their surroundings, because of peer pressure, because of religion. There's so many reasons why they can be homophobic. Half the time, they don't even know they're homophobic until one calls it out. Homophobia plays a huge role because the moment you come out, in most cases, you become very isolated. And one's world starts to revolve around the children because the children, when they're little, don't have a place to go but stay there. But as long as they have an exposure to the outside world, they will always bring back homophobia. I remember a case where one of my sons went to visit their aunt, and his cousin says to him, "Your mother is gay, so you're going to be a homo too." And the boy was very upset. I had to ask myself, and in as much as I felt bad for him back then, as things evolved, I had to ask myself, what's so bad about being a homosexual? Do you know what I mean? And I didn't see it as homophobia back then. Today I do. Not internalized homophobia, but it is still homophobia. Because if somebody says, "Oh, your mom is gay and you're going to be gay too," okay, what's the big deal? If I am gay, I am gay. That's the way I say it today. Back then, I didn't say it that way. So there is homophobia. I mean, we're bound to face it.
Why didn't you see it that way back then?
I think back then I was going through so much, honestly. I was going through so much internally. I had come out. People pretended like I didn't come out. They still wanted to treat me like I was still pretending to be heterosexual. But they knew something was wrong because I was angry all the time. I was very sad. I went through a very depressed period of my life when I was going through the turmoil. But even when I came out, people didn't want to accept that. So I found myself coming out almost every day. You know, I was so busy. This is around the time as well that the real estate market crashed. I had a lot more on my hands to deal with. I went through a lot. I just didn't see it. And that's the reason why I know that a lot of my biological mothers will walk around with rose-colored glasses. And it takes a lot of confronting oneself, challenging oneself to see the world through clear glasses. And unfortunately, for most of us, it's not until we hit the wall that we're really able to see these things. That's why it's important for this kind of conversations to happen.
You and I know that there are many lesbian and gay couples who are struggling with this particular issue. And to your point, there's not a whole lot of conversation around it. And as we come up towards the end, what advice specifically for LGBTQ people, and maybe even broader, but let's include the LGBTQ community specifics. What advice would you have for lesbian and gay couples out there who are thinking of starting a family, who find themselves with a family? What advice would you have for them?
The lesbian couples that are thinking of having families are a lot luckier than you and I. And I'll tell you why. Or rather than me, not you, because you're consciously child-free. When you're a human being, a woman, and you decide you want to have children, first of all, have the child on your own. There's no such thing as a single parent. We had that conversation yesterday. There's always another biological somebody there. Especially if you're a lesbian, there's going to be a biological man. My advice is don't have that child with somebody else. Go do commercial IVF so that you are the only one that has the rights to this child to discipline them and all that. But also find a community that can be truthful with you and be open to hearing things that you might not see, but it's important for you to be able to see. That's one. Now, those are the newbies, because I'm quite up there. I'm very close to 60, right? When I was growing up, being gay was not accepted in the Nigerian culture, in the American culture, in the Black culture, name it. It just wasn't accepted. I thought, like many lesbians before me, that if I just went the other way, I would be fine. I wasn't. Now, if you find yourself in that position, do not bring in children into the equation. Because when the divorce happens, it's going to be a problem. When you come out of the closet, it's going to be a problem, right? And then when you meet the love of your life, I spent over 13 years raising my children by myself, financially, emotionally, any kind of way you can think of. When it came time for me to finally meet somebody, and I dated other people, I dated 2 other people before I met you. They realized that I was truly vested in this relationship. It became a tug of war. It was emotionally wrenching on every level. They were fighting for space. They were not space, power, right? And here I am trying to build a life with another person. They made my life very miserable. They made it very difficult. And, psychologists will say, oh yeah, it's because they were going through trauma. It wasn't about that. It was because I had never had boundaries. I allowed them to do whatever. We had conversations about everything because I thought that was what parenting in 2000s were. Unfortunately, it wasn't. So it backfired. Bottom line is that if you find yourself in a relationship with a man and you think you're gay, don't bring children into the equation at the moment. If you find yourself in a relationship where you already have children and you have left the relationship, even as a straight person, if you leave a relationship and you're not going to go into the monastery and become, a monk as a man or become whatever, and you think of building another life, you have to start preparing your life for that person by allowing your children to understand, by teaching your children to understand that their position in your life is a maternal, and your position with your partner is a romantic and erotic. Well, maybe you won't use the erotic word, but it's going to be different. The dynamics has to be different. Preparation, transparency is key.
Those are great tips. And from my standpoint, I don't want to leave. It's very important for me, on behalf of other consciously child-free women out there, to ensure that the audience understands that because a woman has made the conscious decision not to have biological children, that should not in any way be interpreted as she doesn't like children, she hates children, she doesn't want children around her. No, it's simply a question of biology. She didn't want that biological experience. And so for me, coming into our relationship, I was open to doing exactly the same thing that I'd done for all the other children in my life before I met your children. And I think I would give people the same advice I gave myself, which is, for women like me in a lesbian relationship, don't immediately, I always told myself, don't immediately leap into trying to be a parent or to trying to discipline. Try to be more of a mentor, which was my style. For others, it might be more of a friend, but for me, it was more of a mentor. And at the end of the day, I think what's most important is for the person to realize that a lot of this is out of your control. You're not going to be able to control a significant amount of how this ends up playing out. And I think at the end of the day, hold on to the principles of doing what's right and doing what's fair. And I think empathy. But very importantly, don't lose yourself. Don't lose yourself in the search to become a family. Parenting, I think, is what the focus should be on. Trying to continue to hold true to raising children who are emotionally, psychologically well-rounded and well-developed. Moji, do you have any closing words for the audience?
Parenting could be... Actually, I think we need to do another show. Because there's so many lies that we've been told about parenting, especially as women. And I think it's time that we start to debunk a lot of that. Oh, because you have a child does not mean that you lose yourself and you give up your whole life and existence for that child. Your job is to raise them to a certain age and then let them go out and create their own lives. But I'd like to have another conversation. So for the audience, hold tight for the next session. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much for being here. Until next time. Thank you to everyone for listening in to the Solar-Wilson conversation, where we share our views through the lens of a Nigerian, lesbian, legally married couple. So signing off, I am Margaret Solar-Wilson.
And I am Moji Solar-Wilson.
And as usual, we leave you with our message. Be authentic. Your voice is unique and your words are truth. Your story is powerful. Never, ever be afraid to share your unique perspective and story with the world. Your story will touch someone. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next week.